Judge Judy had watched people walk into her courtroom believing they could sue away embarrassment. She had seen angry customers, dishonest business owners, and entitled plaintiffs insist that being held accountable was somehow a personal attack. But nothing prepared the courtroom for the moment retail manager Karen Whitmore slammed her designer handbag onto the plaintiff's table and shouted, "You publicly humiliated me, and now you're going to pay for it." The handbag tipped over. A single laminated employee badge slid across the polished floor and stopped directly in front of the bailiff's shoes. Nobody picked it up. Nobody spoke. The gallery stared at the badge. Karen quickly reached for it, but Judge Judy calmly raised one hand. "Leave it where it is." Karen froze. The badge looked ordinary, just another retail identification card from an upscale department store. But Judge Judy studied it for several seconds before quietly making a note on the corner of her file. Karen didn't notice. She was too busy smiling at the cameras. She believed this lawsuit was already hers. After all, she wasn't being sued. She was the one doing the suing. According to her complaint, Judge Judy's televised comments during an earlier arbitration had destroyed her reputation, embarrassed her in front of millions of viewers, and ultimately cost her career as a regional retail manager. She demanded $50,000 for emotional distress and public humiliation. The case sounded dramatic. But Judge Judy had already noticed something far more interesting. Sitting beside the court file was a sealed evidence envelope marked with a single label. Asterisk Storka Archive. Sieved under court order. She never touched it, not yet. Truth doesn't become stronger because it's revealed quickly. Sometimes it becomes stronger because it's revealed at exactly the right moment. Karen looked toward the judge with unmistakable confidence. "You embarrassed me on national television." Judge Judy remained perfectly calm. "Is that your testimony?" "It absolutely is." Karen folded her arms. "You made me look like a bully." Judge Judy simply nodded once. Experienced judges understand something many people never learn. When someone focuses entirely on how they appeared, they're often hoping nobody asks how they behaved. Before this unbelievable courtroom story goes any further, make sure you're subscribed for more unforgettable courtroom dramas like this. And if you're watching for the first time, let us know in the comments where you're watching from, because this case is about to take a turn no one inside that courtroom expected. Across the courtroom sat the defendant. Unlike Karen, Judge Judy wasn't defending herself with speeches. The evidence would do that. Standing beside the defense table was the store's former assistant manager, Ethan Collins. He wasn't a celebrity. He wasn't a lawyer. He was simply the witness who had requested that the court subpoena archive security footage from the day Karen claimed her humiliation began. He carried a worn notebook secured with a faded blue rubber band. Judge Judy noticed it immediately. People who preserve records usually expect that one day they'll need them. Karen glanced at Ethan and laughed. "He's just a disgruntled employee." Ethan never responded. He quietly rested the notebook on the table. Real credibility rarely announces itself. Judge Judy finally broke the silence. "Mr. Collins, before we discuss the television broadcast," she looked briefly toward the sealed evidence envelope. "I want to understand what happened inside that store before any cameras were ever involved." Karen's smile weakened. Only slightly. Most people missed it. Judge Judy didn't, because she had already read one sentence in the subpoena response that changed the entire direction of the case. It wasn't about the television episode. It wasn't even about public humiliation. It was about what the store's security cameras had quietly recorded, hours before anyone realized they would become the most important witnesses in the courtroom. The courtroom remained unusually quiet after Judge Judy's final question. Karen Whitmore had entered the room expecting to relive an embarrassing television moment. Instead, the conversation had shifted somewhere she clearly hadn't planned for. Judge Judy folded her hands. "Mr. Collins," she said calmly, "tell the court about Miss Whitmore before anyone ever heard her name on television." Ethan Collins stood slowly. He wasn't polished. He wasn't theatrical. He simply looked like someone who had spent months carrying information he never expected anyone would believe. I worked under Miss Whitmore for almost 4 years, Judge Judy nodded. And what was your position? Assistant store manager. Karen immediately rolled her eyes. He was written up 3 times. Judge Judy looked toward her. I didn't ask you. Karen leaned back in her chair, visibly annoyed. Ethan continued. Our store wasn't failing. In fact, we were one of the highest performing locations in the district. Judge Judy made a note. So why are we here? Ethan glanced toward Karen before answering. Because success can hide a lot of things. The courtroom became still. Some managers inspire loyalty, others demand obedience. There's a difference, and experienced judges recognize it almost immediately. Ethan placed the worn notebook on the evidence table. Judge Judy noticed that every page was marked with colored tabs. This notebook wasn't created for court, Ethan explained. It was my daily management journal. Karen laughed. You expect everyone to believe your diary? Judge Judy calmly interrupted. A journal written before litigation often carries more weight than testimony written after it. Karen stopped smiling. Judge Judy opened the notebook. Every page contained dates, DITB schedules, and inventory notes. Customer complaints, maintenance reports, nothing dramatic. Just the ordinary details of running a busy retail store, until one particular page. Judge Judy stopped reading. Across the top was a handwritten entry from nearly 11 months earlier. Customer incident near Register 6. Security footage requested. Employee crying in stockroom. Judge Judy looked up. Who was the employee? Ethan answered quietly. 19-year-old cashier Emily Foster. Karen sighed loudly. Oh, please. Judge Judy ignored the interruption. What happened? Ethan took a slow breath. A customer returned an expensive handbag without a receipt. Judge Judy nodded. And store policy required manager approval. He looked toward Karen. Ms. Whitmore came to the register. The narrator understood why Ethan chose his words carefully. People who have lived through difficult moments often describe them with precision instead of anger, Judge Judy asked. What did she do? Ethan hesitated. She refused the return. Karen immediately smiled. Exactly. I followed company policy. Ethan nodded. That wasn't the problem. Judge Judy looked interested. What was? He pointed toward the notebook. The customer apologized and began walking away. Another pause. Ms. Whitmore followed her. The courtroom remained silent. Into the middle of the sales floor. Karen shifted in her chair. Ethan continued. She accused the customer of trying to scam the store. Judge Judy raised one eyebrow. In front of other shoppers. Yes. Karen crossed her arms. She was committing fraud. Judge Judy asked calmly. Was she arrested? No. Was stolen merchandise recovered? No. Was there any evidence she committed fraud? Karen hesitated. Not at that moment. Judge Judy quietly wrote another note. People who rush to humiliate others often mistake suspicion for proof, Ethan continued. The customer started crying. He paused. So did Emily. Judge Judy looked up. The cashier? Ethan nodded. Emily kept telling Miss Whitmore the receipt had just been found inside the customer's purse. Karen looked away, but Miss Whitmore kept accusing her anyway. Judge Judy closed the notebook gently. This still doesn't explain your lawsuit. Karen leaned forward quickly. Because it doesn't matter. She pointed toward Ethan. He's trying to make me look like some monster. Judge Judy looked directly at Karen. No, she replied calmly. He's establishing a pattern. Those 3 words changed the atmosphere. Karen's attorney slowly shifted in his chair. He hadn't expected that. Neither had Karen. Judge Judy rested her fingertips on the sealed evidence envelope. The notebook tells me what someone remembered. She paused. The security footage tells me what actually happened. Karen's confidence flickered again. For the first time all morning, she looked nervous instead of offended, because she suddenly remembered one small detail from that afternoon inside the store. She had personally instructed an employee to save the surveillance recording. She believed it would prove she was right. What she never realized was that the same recording had captured nearly 20 minutes before the confrontation at Register 6. 20 minutes she had completely forgotten. 20 minutes that would soon expose who had truly humiliated whom. Judge Judy left the sealed evidence envelope exactly where it was. She wasn't ready to open it, not because she doubted what was inside, because timing matters in a courtroom. People often reveal more while trying to outrun the evidence than the evidence ever reveals by itself. Karen Whitmore sat straighter in her chair. She had recovered some of her confidence after Ethan's testimony. She convinced herself the notebook was nothing more than one former employee's opinion. Opinions could be challenged, video could not. But she still believed the cameras supported her. What Karen didn't understand was that memory often edits uncomfortable moments. Security cameras never do. Judge Judy turned another page in the case file. Mrs. Whitmore. Karen answered immediately. Yes? You've described yourself as the victim of public humiliation. Absolutely. You've testified that my comments on television ruined your professional reputation. They did. Judge Judy nodded. And before that broadcast, she paused. Had anyone ever complained about your treatment of customers? Karen smiled confidently. No. Judge Judy looked toward Ethan. Mr. Collins? Ethan quietly opened the worn notebook again. This notebook only contains incidents I personally witnessed. He slid several stapled pages across the evidence table. But I also brought copies of formal customer complaints submitted to corporate. Karen's attorney looked surprised. You have those? They were provided after the subpoena. Judge Judy accepted the documents. There were 6 complaints, different dates, different customers, different employees. Yet every complaint described remarkably similar behavior. Public accusations, raised voices, embarrassing customers in front of other shoppers. Judge Judy looked thoughtfully at Karen. Interesting. Karen shifted uncomfortably. Anyone can file a complaint. Judge Judy agreed. That's true. She placed the papers down. But unrelated people rarely invent the same pattern. The courtroom grew noticeably quieter. Experienced judges understand that isolated mistakes happen. Pearls demand closer attention. Karen folded her arms. Judge Judy asked calmly, were any of these complaints investigated? Karen hesitated. Corporate reviewed them, and no disciplinary action. Judge Judy nodded once. Do you know why? Karen smiled again. Because they weren't true. Judge Judy slowly reached into the court file. She removed a company memorandum. This internal review says something different. Karen's smile disappeared. Judge Judy began reading. Store management counseled regarding repeated customer interaction complaints. Additional leadership training recommended. She lowered the document. Did you receive additional training? Karen looked toward her attorney before answering. Yes. So corporate believed enough of the complaints to require corrective action. Karen didn't answer. The silence answered for her. Truth doesn't always arrive with dramatic revelations. Sometimes it arrives one admission at a time. Judge Judy turned toward Ethan. You mentioned another employee, Emily Foster. Does she still work for the company? No. What happened? Ethan took a slow breath. She resigned 2 weeks after the Register incident. Judge Judy asked quietly, did she explain why? Ethan nodded. She said she couldn't keep working somewhere people were humiliated before they were heard. The gallery fell completely silent. Karen quickly interrupted. She was emotionally unstable. Judge Judy immediately looked up. When someone cannot defeat the facts, she paused, they often attack the person. Karen looked away. Judge Judy continued. Do you have evidence Miss Foster was unstable? No medical records? No performance reviews? No, so that's simply your opinion. Karen swallowed. Yes. Judge Judy made another note. The narrator understood exactly what had happened. Karen wasn't defending her actions anymore. She was trying to discredit everyone who remembered them. People who cannot erase the truth often try to erase the witness. Judge Judy finally rested both hands on the sealed evidence envelope. She looked directly at Karen. Mrs. Whitmore, Karen's voice sounded much smaller now. Yes, you testified that the television program embarrassed you unfairly. Yes, Judge Judy nodded. But according to these complaints, she tapped the stack of documents. The behavior discussed on television wasn't new. Karen remained silent. It had already happened inside your own store. Karen's attorney quietly whispered, Karen, is there anything else I need to know before that envelope is opened? Karen closed her eyes because she suddenly remembered exactly what the security cameras had captured before Register 6, not just the customer. Not just Emily, but Karen herself, laughing with another supervisor about how embarrassing customers teaches them not to argue. And if the courtroom saw those 20 forgotten minutes, her lawsuit for public humiliation would collapse under the weight of her own behavior. Judge Judy rested one hand on the sealed evidence envelope. No one in the courtroom moved. Karen's attorney quietly adjusted his glasses. Ethan Collins stared at the tabletop. Even the gallery sensed that whatever was inside the envelope had already changed the direction of the case. Judge Judy looked directly at Karen. You've told this court that you were publicly humiliated. Karen nodded. Yes. You've testified that the television broadcast falsely portrayed you as someone who enjoyed embarrassing customers. Karen answered without hesitation. Exactly. Judge Judy leaned back slightly. I've learned something after decades on the bench. She paused. People don't usually fear evidence that supports them. The courtroom remained silent. They fear evidence they hope everyone forgot. Karen swallowed. Judge Judy finally opened the envelope. Inside were several labeled storage disks, printed screenshots, and a certified chain of custody document from the department store's security contractor. She removed the certification first. Every recording had been preserved exactly as it existed on the store's surveillance system. No edits, no missing timestamps, no alterations. Judge Judy nodded once. The court accepts the footage. Karen's attorney slowly exhaled. He already sensed where this was heading. Before the first video played, Judge Judy addressed the audience in the courtroom. If you think you already know what these cameras recorded, don't rush to your conclusion. She looked briefly toward Karen. Sometimes this important evidence begins before people realize they're being watched. If you're already starting to piece this together, comment *justice below, because what Judge Judy was about to reveal would completely change the meaning of this lawsuit. The courtroom monitor flickered on. Camera 1 what? Break room. Playmat. 9:42 a.m. Nearly 20 minutes before the customer entered the store, Karen appeared laughing with another supervisor while drinking coffee. There was no customer. No confrontation, just employees talking casually before opening. The recording had audio. Judge Judy pressed play. Karen's voice echoed through the courtroom. You know the trick? The other supervisor laughed. What trick? Karen smiled confidently. When customers start arguing, don't lower your voice. She laughed again. Raise yours. The courtroom became still, Karen continued. If enough people are watching, they back down from embarrassment. A few jurors in the public gallery exchanged uneasy looks. Judge Judy didn't interrupt. She simply allowed the recording to continue. The supervisor asked, "What if they're actually right?" Karen shrugged. "Doesn't matter," she laughed. "They'll apologize just to escape the attention." The laughter on the recording suddenly sounded much colder inside the courtroom than it probably had inside the break room. Judge Judy paused the video. She didn't raise her voice. Mrs. Whitmore. Karen stared at the monitor. "Did you say those words?" Karen hesitated. "It was a joke." Judge Judy tilted her head. "A joke?" "Yes, so embarrassing customers into surrendering complaints." She looked directly into Karen's eyes. "Was your sense of humor?" Karen didn't answer. Silence settled over the room. Experienced judges recognized something important. When someone suddenly calls their own words a joke, they're usually trying to escape responsibility for saying them. Judge Judy resumed the footage. Only 4 minutes later, another employee entered the room. It was 19-year-old cashier Emily Foster. She looked nervous. Karen immediately stopped smiling. Emily quietly asked, "Mrs. Whitmore, if that customer comes back today, can I help someone else instead?" Karen folded her arms on the recording. "No." Emily looked uncomfortable. "I don't think yesterday went very well," Karen answered sharply. "You're not paid to think." Emily lowered her eyes. Judge Judy paused the video again. No one in the courtroom spoke. The monitor remained frozen on Emily's face, a young employee trying desperately to avoid another confrontation. Judge Judy looked toward Karen. "You've described yourself as the victim of humiliation." She gestured toward the screen. "Would you like to explain hers?" Karen opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Her attorney quietly whispered, "Karen." But before she could answer, Judge Judy reached for the second security disc. According to the label, it contained footage from Register 6. The exact moment Karen claimed everything had gone wrong. And if the first recording had exposed her attitude, the second one was about to expose her actions. The courtroom remained frozen. Emily Foster's face was still paused on the courtroom monitor. A 19-year-old cashier, shoulders lowered, eyes fixed on the floor. The image alone seemed to say more than a dozen witnesses ever could. Judge Judy let the silence linger. She had spent decades learning one simple truth. Real intimidation rarely announces itself through violence. More often, it hides inside ordinary conversations that everyone else learns to accept. She removed the second security disc from its case. Across the front, a white label read, Radar 6, 10:01 a.m. "This," Judge Judy said quietly, "is the moment Mrs. Whitmore claims ultimately led to her public humiliation." The courtroom lights dimmed slightly as the recording began. Unlike the first clip, this camera overlooked the sales floor. Customers walked between clothing racks. Children laughed near a display of backpacks. Everything appeared perfectly normal. Then an elderly woman approached Register 6, carrying an expensive leather handbag. Emily greeted her politely. The customer smiled. She explained she wanted to exchange the bag because the zipper had broken only 3 days after purchase. Emily looked through the shopping bag. "No problem, ma'am." "Let me call my manager." Karen entered the frame, confident, fast, already looking irritated. Judge Judy watched without saying a word. Karen barely glanced at the handbag before speaking. "No receipt?" The woman searched her purse. "I thought it was in here." Karen crossed her arms. "Convenient." The customer looked embarrassed. "I'm sure I still have it." Emily quietly interrupted. "Mrs. Whitmore, our loyalty system might have the purchase." Karen never looked at her. "I didn't ask you." Emily immediately fell silent. The narrator noticed something important. People who seek the truth ask questions. People who seek control silence everyone else first. The video continued. The older woman finally located the receipt tucked inside a side pocket. She smiled with visible relief. "Oh, here it is." Emily reached for it. Karen stopped her. Instead of reading it, Karen raised it into the air where nearby shoppers could clearly see. "So you had it the whole time." Several customers turned toward the register. The elderly woman's smile disappeared. Karen continued speaking loudly. "Funny how receipts suddenly appear when people realize they're caught." Judge Judy immediately paused the recording. She turned toward Karen. "Mrs. Whitmore." Karen stared straight ahead. "When exactly was this customer caught?" Karen hesitated. "I believed she was attempting fraud." Judge Judy nodded slowly. "But by this point," she pointed at the frozen image of the receipt. She had already produced valid proof of purchase. Karen swallowed. "Yes. So why continue accusing her?" Karen couldn't answer. The silence stretched longer than anyone expected. Bodies confess before mouths do. Judge Judy resumed the video. The older customer quietly apologized, despite having done nothing wrong. I'm sorry for the misunderstanding." Karen folded her arms. "Maybe next time you won't waste everyone's time." Several shoppers stared. One mother gently pulled her young daughter away from the register. Another customer visibly shook his head. Emily looked devastated. Then something happened that changed the emotional direction of the entire case. The elderly woman quietly reached into her purse. She removed a folded tissue, not to wipe her hands, to wipe away tears. The courtroom became absolutely silent. Judge Judy stopped the video again. She looked toward Ethan. "What happened after this?" Ethan answered softly. "The woman left without exchanging the handbag." "And Emily?" she cried in the stockroom. Judge Judy nodded, then she looked back at Karen. "You claimed national television humiliated you." She paused. But months before that broadcast, she pointed toward the frozen image on the monitor. "You publicly humiliated a customer who had done absolutely nothing wrong." Karen's attorney lowered his head. He no longer had questions. He barely had a defense. Karen finally whispered, "I didn't think it looked that bad." Judge Judy answered with calm precision. "That's because you were watching it through memory." She gestured toward the screen. The camera watched it through facts. Karen's eyes filled with tears. For the first time since filing the lawsuit, she wasn't worried about winning. She was realizing that every argument she had built depended on the courtroom never seeing what had actually happened inside that store. Judge Judy slowly reached for one final document resting beneath the security discs. Unlike everything else, it wasn't from the store. It wasn't from the television studio. It was an internal corporate investigation report that had never been discussed during testimony. She glanced at the first page, then quietly closed the folder. "If this report says what I believe it says," she remarked, "this case is no longer about embarrassment. It becomes about whether this lawsuit itself was built on a knowingly false narrative." The entire courtroom waited because everyone understood the verdict was only moments away. The courtroom remained perfectly still. Judge Judy rested one hand on the final document. Unlike the surveillance footage, this report had never been shown on television. Unlike Karen's testimony, it hadn't been rewritten. And unlike memory, it hadn't faded. It had been prepared by the retail company's own corporate compliance department just weeks after the incident at Register 6. Judge Judy opened the report. She adjusted her glasses and quietly read the first page. Then she looked directly at Karen Whitmore. "Mrs. Whitmore." Karen slowly raised her eyes. "This report was completed 4 months before the television episode you claim ruined your reputation." Karen's face tightened. Judge Judy continued. "It concludes that your management style repeatedly created unnecessary public confrontations with customers and employees." She lifted another page. "It also states that your employment was terminated after an internal review found multiple violations of company customer service policy." Karen immediately shook her head. "I resigned." Judge Judy calmly slid the report toward her. "The resignation letter was submitted after you were informed termination paperwork had already been approved." The courtroom fell silent. Karen's attorney slowly closed his legal pad. He understood there was no recovering from this. Judge Judy continued reading. "The report specifically references the Register 6 incident." She paused. "It states that surveillance footage confirmed the customer had produced a valid receipt before you continued accusing her in front of other shoppers." Judge Judy looked up. "So the company did not discipline you because of television." She let the silence settle. "It disciplined you because of your own conduct." Karen lowered her head. Tears rolled onto the table. For the first time all afternoon, there was no anger, no outrage, no performance. Only regret. Judge Judy folded the report and placed it beside the surveillance discs. "This court has reviewed your complaint for public humiliation." She glanced toward Ethan Collins. "It has also reviewed independent video evidence, internal company records, witness testimony, and your own statements." She turned back to Karen. "The facts are clear." She spoke slowly, making sure every word carried its full weight. You were not publicly humiliated by false statements. You were publicly criticized after your own documented behavior became impossible to ignore. The gallery remained completely silent. Judge Judy continued. Your lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice. Karen closed her eyes, but Judge Judy wasn't finished. She turned toward Ethan. Mr. Collins filed a counterclaim for attorney's fees, lost wages related to mandatory court appearances, and damages resulting from defamatory accusations made after this lawsuit was filed. She reviewed the financial records one final time. The documentation supports those losses. Judge Judy looked directly at Karen. This court awards Mr. Collins $25,000. A quiet gasp swept across the courtroom, the exact figure Karen had demanded for herself. She was now ordered to pay. Karen's shoulders slumped. She didn't argue. She didn't object. She simply whispered, I understand. Judge Judy leaned forward slightly before delivering the final words that everyone in the courtroom would remember long after the case ended. Asterisk. Respect is earned by protecting people's dignity, not by demanding they protect your pride. No one spoke. Even the bailiff seemed to pause for a moment. Ethan quietly picked up his worn notebook. Inside its front cover was a handwritten sentence his late father had written years earlier. Character is what remains after every excuse has been exhausted. He smiled faintly before closing it. Judge Judy noticed. Sometimes the smallest objects carry the greatest truths. Within 24 hours of the ruling, the courtroom clip spread rapidly across social media. Not because someone had been embarrassed, but because millions watched accountability unfold without shouting or spectacle. Within 48 hours, the retail company released a brief statement confirming it, stood by the findings of its internal investigation, and reaffirmed its commitment to respectful customer treatment. Within 72 hours, Ethan received messages from former coworkers thanking him for speaking honestly when they had been too afraid to do so themselves. As for Karen, she quietly withdrew from public interviews. She eventually paid the judgment in full. The money mattered. But it wasn't what people remembered. They remembered the security footage, the same cameras Karen believed would protect her. The same cameras that quietly preserved every moment she wished had been forgotten. The narrator reflected on why this fictional courtroom story resonated with so many viewers. It was never truly about one lawsuit. It wasn't even about $25,000. It was about the difference between humiliation and accountability. One is inflicted on innocent people. The other is earned when someone's own actions finally catch up with them. Security cameras don't take sides. They don't care about titles, confidence, or carefully rehearsed stories. They simply remember. And when truth is allowed to speak without interruption, even the loudest accusation can collapse under the weight of a single recording. If this courtroom story reminded you that accountability always outlasts arrogance, don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more unforgettable courtroom dramas, and share it with someone who believes evidence should always matter more than emotion. And tell us in the comments, at what moment did you realize Karen's lawsuit was already lost?